Hello, welcome to a Bible study that we have produced for this purpose. We used to do these all the time, obviously on a little bit different location. This one isn't live, but we're hoping to do them live coming soon. We used to do these quite frequently from my office. Here I'm kind of in my home office because we are all currently on a stay-at-home order. That's where we find ourselves. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about Genesis 4 today, a little bit about Hebrew, maybe a little Greek, and the question that comes up in Genesis 4, am I my brother's keeper? And hopefully that finds you today kind of where you are. I think it's pretty relevant to today, so let's jump in. I'm going to start with reading a passage here. This comes from, again, Genesis chapter 4. So far what's happened in the book of Genesis, this is the first book in the Bible. God has created everything. There's two kind of poems of creation. The first poem is about a 6-day creation narrative that talks about creation care and caring and exercising good dominion. And then Genesis 2, which begins with the story of Adam and Eve. And we've talked a lot about that, namely because there's this really beautiful idea that's presented in the narrative that humans are not designed to be alone. And so as we've kind of all been in quarantine or at least in this kind of weird social distancing thing that we've all been trying to participate in, we've been talking about what that could do to us psychologically and kind of hoping to continue to connect. So like I said, I'm going to read here from Genesis 4, and this is the story of Cain and Abel. So after Adam and Eve, Eve gives birth to two sons, Cain and Abel. And we're picking it up here. One of them, Cain, tends the fields, and Abel, he tends the flocks. And they both give an offering to God. That's what this story is about. And God seems to prefer one offering over the other. And so Cain, whose offering is not preferred, takes vengeance on his brother Abel. He kills him, and it leads God to ask this question, where is your brother? And Cain responds very callously, am I supposed to be keeping track of him? Or am I my brother's keeper? So I'm going to read the story starting from verse 3, Genesis 4. We'll start from verse 3. Okay. In the course of time, Cain brought forth to the Lord an offering of fruit from the ground. And Abel, for his part, brought the firstlings of his flock, their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel's offering, but not for Cain's offering. But for Cain's offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it. Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out into the field. And when they were out in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood is crying out from the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it will no longer yield to you strength. You will be a fugitive and a wanderer in the earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. So this question that Cain asks, I think, is the question that we're all considering today, because it's a question, I believe, that humanity has been asking since its inception. Obviously this narrative points to that, but it's really a question in all of us. It's a question of the human condition. Are we our brother's keeper? And this in Hebrew, I'm going to read it because I do not speak Hebrew, so this is my best shot at it. It says, Anoki achai chasomer. And literally it means, Anoki am I achai of my brother, chasomer, the keeper. Or am I my brother's keeper? And achai comes from this root ach, in Hebrew, which literally means brother, which I think is fitting for anybody who's ever had a younger brother, because it makes your younger brothers often make you want to go, ugh. Or if you're a girl, maybe both your older brothers and your younger brothers are more or less mature than you, and you just go, ugh, all the time. But that's the Hebrew word, literally, for brothers, ugh. And in the New Testament, now I'm going to jump into Greek here, we have another word for brother, because the New Testament is written in Greek, and that word is adelphos, or adelphi. And that, why it's important, for me at least, in understanding Hebrew using Greek, is because Greek acts in many ways as a bridge for us to Hebrew. Hebrew is a very ancient language. We know that it has not changed at all, basically, for thousands of years. It's a pretty amazing language. It's very difficult to understand. It's very contextually based. And so a lot of times when we're reading in Hebrew, when we're trying to understand Hebrew terminology or euphemism in Hebrew, or exaggeration, or all these other things, even things like idioms, we have trouble understanding them because in Hebrew we're so far removed from the ancient Hebrew people. But Greek, we're actually we're not that far removed from. So, Greco-Roman culture is something that's very well recorded historically. We do still have the language of Greek, although not quite Koine Greek, which is what the Bible is written in, or the New Testament's written in. But right around the time of Jesus, there was a translation of the Old Testament produced called the Septuagint, or the translation of the 70, where all of these native Hebrew speakers, experts in Hebrew culture and Hebrew history, wrote down the Bible in Greek. And so a lot of times what we do is we can use their Greek words, which we understand the language of Greek better, hey, what did you say about this term in Greek? And help me understand what the Hebrew understanding of that term is based on what word in Greek you used for it. And so that's why I'm pointing out adelphi here, which are adelphos, which is the Greek alternative in the Septuagint to achai, or brother, and which then we get achai, of my brother. So adelphos, we know, comes from Delphi, the womb, and adelphos, then sharing of the womb. But Jesus uses this term in the first century, kind of that same time when the Septuagint was written, for people who are not technically his biological blood brothers. He uses it for the 12 disciples. He uses it for people who he comes in contact with. Sometimes he calls his enemies brother. But he keeps it within the Judeo context, the Jewish context. Then Paul comes along with this ministry to the Gentiles, or the non-Jewish people, or the Greek people at the time. And Paul actually expands the use of adelphos to all people. And so what we have here is this kind of varying expansion of the idea of brotherhood, or ahuana in Hebrew, to include kind of all of creation, which I think is really the question that Cain's asking. He's not asking, am I my biological brother's keeper? He's asking, do I have to care about anyone else, or am I just responsible for myself? And so when we think about chasomer, a keeper, it's a person who watches, it's a person who guards, it's a person who shepherds, literally keeping their flocks, right? The keeper of the flocks is the shepherd. And Jesus then uses that and says, and good shepherds, they defend their sheep even to their death. They defend their sheep with their life. Or caring for. It's actually, chasomer is so specific, you can even say spying on someone. I mean, that's how closely you're supposed to be watching them. And so when Cain says in this very kind of crass way after killing his brother, am I, which is what Anoki, so am I Anoki, achai, my brother's chasomer, keeper? He's literally saying, am I supposed to be guarding him? Am I supposed to be watching others? Or am I just responsible for numero uno, me? And I think that that's important for us to understand today, specifically because we are in a time, this coronavirus time, where we really have to ask this question in a very real way. For many of us, it's not necessarily that we're at risk with this virus. If I got the virus, I'm healthy, I'm not 30 yet, I would probably be okay. I don't have any pre-existing conditions. So for all intents and purposes, social distancing for me, or really it's physical distancing, not coming in contact with other people, that shouldn't be a concern for me if I'm not my brother's keeper. If I can ask that question and the answer is no, then it doesn't matter for me. But clearly, I think through this text and through other texts, what we're led to believe by Jesus, who is God incarnate, who comes down to be our brother, even though he didn't have to be our brother, who enters the space of vulnerability, even though he was invulnerable as God. The answer to the question is yes, we are absolutely called to be our brother's keeper. And so that's why I just kind of wanted to give you an encouragement, as you're staying home, be thinking about this passage. I know it's kind of a dark and dreary passage. It's about one brother murdering another brother, and that's not a happy thing to think about, especially in the midst of all the trauma that you've probably already experiencing. But as you're thinking about it, just consider that question for yourself. I think that we're all, it was kind of novel, and I don't want to say exciting, but the first couple days were a little bit, for those of us who like kind of adventure, it was kind of like, oh, okay, like we're just going to have to figure out this new way of doing things. But, as time goes on and the isolation gets more and the nuisances get more, and it starts becoming really, really inconvenient for those of you who maybe it's not that inconvenient yet, remember that you're doing this. You're acting as your brother and your sister's keeper. Because for many people in this world, this is a life or death thing. Whether we as a culture, as a society, as a church, practice this social distancing thing. And so, if you want the theological undergirdings for why you should be doing this and why you should be acting in a really safe way, it's this passage. It's the question, am I supposed to be taking care of other people, or am I just supposed to be worried about myself? And obviously in the New Testament, there's plenty of other places. The story of the Good Samaritan comes to mind. But, that's my encouragement for you today. Just remember, you are your brother's keeper. You are absolutely your brother's keeper. And you're absolutely your sister's keeper. And you're absolutely your elderly neighbor's keeper. And so when they need something, if it's just for you to sit on your couch and not go over and see them, maybe that's the thing. Call them up on the phone. They can't get coronavirus on the phone from you. If they need you to go to the grocery store, you're their keeper. If you have elderly parents or elderly grandparents or relatives, you're their keeper. If you don't know anyone who is in an at-risk category, you're still their keeper, which I'm sure you actually do, and you might just not be thinking about it. But just remember that this at this time in this space, because that's our call. And so we'll be checking in more. We'll be doing more videos like this. If you like this video, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications from the church so you can see more content like this. If you're on Facebook, make sure you're liking our page and following, getting notifications from us. But that's your encouragement for this morning, just to keep on keeping on. If you need anything from us, drop us a message or a comment. We'd love to talk to you. See how you're holding up. We're doing the best we can, and we know that you are too. So praying for all of you, and look forward to doing this again soon. Bye for now.